Pro Football Playbook, presented by the Pigskin Podcast Network. Your source for team news, draft needs, player profiles and rankings, full Senior Bowl, Combine, and NFL draft coverage. News, analysis, discussion. It's in the playbook. Now, here is your host, sports journalist Bill Alvstad, and featured analyst Keith Myers. Hey, Pro Football Playbook Podcast listeners. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. Keith, welcome into the show. We're talking NFL Combine. We've finally made it to the NFL Combine week. Welcome in.
Yeah, we have. It's this is always a fun week. I get to go watch a bunch of athletic kids, run around and do things that don't look like football as we project how well they're going to be at football. So it's kind of a fun week.
Yeah. Every team, this is the hopeful part of the year, right? Where every team starts at the same spot. You go through the free agency process, which is coming up, and we'll have plenty of shows to talk about that in the next few weeks. And then this week is the Combine. This is where all the prospects come. They've worked all season since the college football season stopped for them to hone their skills on all these different athletic things that they're supposed to do in front of all 32 teams at the Combine. There's also the interview process. So all 32 teams will have access to about 30 prospects of their choosing throughout the week that they can sit down with and have one-on-one interviews with, which is an incredibly important process. We also want to talk about the medical evaluations, which is critically important for teams to make sure that their players are in top-notch order before they spend high picks on them. So let's talk about the process a little bit, what you're expecting this week, maybe some of the the press conferences that happened this week and so forth.
Yeah, so every team is there in force, right? They've got head coach, assistant coaches, general manager, scouts, pretty much everyone who has any say in personnel is there at the Combine. And with that, the media is also there and they want to talk to people. And so you'll get press conferences for every coach and GM in the league. And so you can actually get some information out of them. Whether it's good information or not remains to be seen, because this is what is affectionately known as lying season in the NFL, because teams don't want to give away their plan. They don't want to give away their bargaining position in negotiations. They don't want to tell other teams what they want to do in the draft and then have someone else be like, hey, we want that player, and move up in front of them. And so there's a lot of things that are said. Whether any of them are true or not will remain to be seen.
Yeah. So which teams are really excited to be at the Combine now? Like, it seems like, teams with multiple first round picks, like the Jets and the Giants and the Eagles. The Eagles, we got 3 first round picks. They're not tremendous, but they're all in the middle, and they could turn 1 or 2 of those picks, drop back in the draft, and do even more additional picks. They could really kind of remake their franchise. This must be a really exciting time to be a Eagles fan, because they're right on the edge. I mean, they've got a roster that's not horrible. And if they hit this draft in 1 or 2 years, they could be viable in the NFC East for sure.
Oh yeah, the biggest question that they have is a quarterback, and I know that Eagles fans might take exception to that because they seem to like their guy, but he's extremely limited as a thrower. Great runner, but very limited as a thrower, and so they need to make a decision on whether they're going to address that pick or not, or try and build around in a very unconventional player at that position. But the fact that they've got 3 first-round picks means if they fall in love with the quarterback, they could move up and get him and not have it affect them in future years. Or if they don't, if they want to stay in place, they can go get 3 starting borderline Pro Bowl caliber players and add that to the roster this year with very little salary cap implications to that because they're all on rookie deals. And so being able to add that much talent right in the draft is just infusing a team with young talent. It's a great way to build a roster.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, it's a great time to be a fan. Like I would just be, you had to go through a bad year. And it wasn't even a horrible year. It was kind of an uplifting year for them. It was one of those seasons that was kind of written off. And all of a sudden you're still in the conversation, in week 17 about being a playoff team. That's got to feel good then going into the draft and having all that draft capital to be able to kind of just have the draft come to you and move around. And my goodness, fun time. Any other, so what are you looking for in this early process now that everyone kind of flies in early in the week? All the teams are there giving interviews, interviewing prospects, going through the measurable portion of the combine early in the week. Anything you're looking for out of that process?
Well, that's really then there are some players that can definitely hurt themselves and before they ever get out their thing to do the drills. And you're going to look for quarterbacks that have tiny hands that teams will like, whoa, we don't want to draft that player. Or
like Kenny Pickett. Let's talk about Kenny Pickett on that.
That's actually who I was thinking of. He's probably the best quarterback in this draft class as far as his tape and everything. But at the Senior Bowl, they're like, his hands are tiny, and which means he may have trouble, especially in wet conditions or cold conditions as an NFL player, getting the ball where he wants it to, because he's got small hands and it's not being able to get the same kind of grip and spin on the football.
Yeah. And in December and January in the NFL, that football becomes very hard. As the colder it gets, and the NFL football is a big ball to begin with. And so it'll be very interesting to see if he can sling it around. Now, I noticed in the Senior Bowl, I think he measured at like 8.5 or something like that. I mean, this is unusually small. And so, and the NFL football is about 1.5 inches in circumference larger than a college football. And so that is a huge thing. I mean, it really is. And Kenny Pickett's a great player and wonderful player, does a lot of intangible type stuff, and had consistent production at Pittsburgh. So we'll see if that really makes a difference. He could be one of those guys that ends up falling. And a guy like Howell, who had an off year, but is a more traditional kind of pocket thrower, if you will, with some upside on at least escaping pressure and so forth, might be a guy that might move up in the draft a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you might see a guy like Pickett, who's got the best tape in the draft class, drop to a team like Pittsburgh that needs a quarterback.
A cold weather team, which I don't know.
But they know him pretty well, and he's been there in town for the last 4 years. But you might see a guy like that drop to a team, whereas the team that needs a quarterback that's in the top reach for a guy like Malik Willis, who has all the athleticism and whatnot. But we were just talking about the Eagles and having a guy who's maybe limited as a thrower. Willis has the arm talent. He can fling it all around, but does he have the accuracy? Does he have the ability to read a defense and that kind of stuff? That's where the questions are going to come in about him.
Let me ask you this. So we've talked about this before with a guy like Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis and Matt Corral, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder at all, not really being ready year one. Mm-hmm. So what would be the motivation of teams to get guys like that when you could get guys possibly a little later in the draft like Bailey Zapp, Caleb Ellerby, Brock Purdy out of Iowa State later in the draft, where you're going to have to develop them anyway?
Fear. That's what it is. Because if you're the general manager of a team without a quarterback and you don't draft a quarterback early, the fans are going to have your head. And if the fans are angry and screaming and everything, the owner is going to start questioning what your decision making. And so if you're one of those teams that needs a quarterback, you need a name that you can fill into that spot on the depth chart and hey, this is our quarterback of the future. You're not going to do that with a 4th round pick like Bailey Zapp. You're going to do that with a 1st round pick like Kenny Pickett. Even if it's a guy that has to sit for a year and you go and sign an Andy Dalton or someone to go be your bridge quarterback for the next year, you still have to have that guy and that who has the draft pedigree in order to justify the existence of them, and so therefore get people patient enough to wait that year for your quarterback to develop. If you go and sign Andy Dalton and then wait till round 4 to draft Bailey Zapp, everyone's gonna be like, what's your plan? You don't have a plan. Your plan is Andy Dalton. That's no plan. And they're going to be ready to run you out of town. So,
and we talked about the desperation. We talked about the quarterback market. It's not bad. It's not good. And it's going to be perceived to be even worse by the time the draft rolls around, because at that point, things are fairly well set on the free agent market, the trade market. Teams are going to know exactly what they've got at this point, and there will be an era of desperation, I think. And it'll be interesting to see if any of these teams that are still desperate, haven't solved their problem at the draft, end up starting 1, 2, or 3 of these quarterbacks out of this draft this next coming year. And I would anticipate at least 2 or 3 of those quarterbacks will be starting in the NFL in September. And
so what you've got here, though, is a draft class that will remind everyone of the Mike Glennon, Geno Smith year of quarterbacks, where you've got some guys that look like they could be long-term NFL backups, but are there NFL starters, long-term starters in this group?
I think the only guy that there's a couple of guys. Matt Corral is a pretty interesting guy just because I think he's got the mental capacity and drive and fortitude to want to be that guy. And so I think he's going to work his butt off. I just get that vibe from him. Sam Howell's another guy I think that could do that, because the year prior in 2020, Sam Howell had a great year. He was on everybody's short list to being the first guy off the boards in the 2021 draft, had a down year, lost some players, lost some weapons. Offensive line wasn't that great. Statistically, he fell back a little bit. He's a guy I think that could maybe come up, and the combine could actually help him. So we'll see.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think is kind of underrated in this group, because a lot of people are talking about him as like the 4th or 5th best quarterback, where I think, he's a guy that needs to be in that consideration for being the first quarterback off the board.
I do too, Keith. I really do. And I think we're going to hear more about that after next weekend. I think after next weekend, people are going to go, hey, Sam Howell, he might be an option, and he might be the safest option. Safest option.
He's got the higher floor, even if it might be a slightly lower ceiling. Whereas Malik Willis has the highest ceiling out of anyone in this draft class at quarterback by leaps and bounds, but he's also got a really low floor. He's limited to a couple of
schemes.
Yeah.
You take a look at like where Jackson plays.
Baltimore.
Baltimore. He could be a Baltimore quarterback in that scheme with under that offensive coordinator. Somebody's going to have to work around his skill set a little bit, I think. Well, initially,
if you're gonna draft him with a top 10 pick, wouldn't it be a safer bet to trade a 3rd round pick to Baltimore for Huntley, their backup, who showed a lot of the same skills and looked really good backing up Jackson this year?
Yeah, and has a year under his belt already. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be really interesting this year. All right, so let's go through the different groups, and let's just talk about some players and what we kind of expect. The running back group is interesting because there's no real standout this year as far as a Saquon Barkley that's going to go in the top in the first round at all. Anyway, I don't see anybody that's really going to move up a lot out of the combine in this group. Everybody kind of expects certain things out of these guys as far as testing, straight line speed, agility, all that kind of stuff. Who do you like here? Who are you looking for maybe in the mid round running back that would give a team some real good value?
Well, the guys I'm looking at in this draft are guys like Zamir White out of Georgia and Haskins, out of Michigan. These are guys that no one's really talking about. They're not they're going to be like the 9th and 10th running back off the board, but I like their combination of size and speed and the way that they run. I think they're going to be productive players at the next level. But they're not going to get fans excited the way like a Saquon Barkley did when he got drafted. But I think coming into the league, they have a chance to be good. And, as a guy that gets drafted in the 4th round, like having a player that can come in and carry the load for your team was a 4th round pick. That's a great value.
Yeah, I think there's guys in the 4th and 5th round here, up through those rounds that can come in and help you and be rotational guys right away. You're going to get any later than say a Zonovan Knight out of North Carolina State. That's probably going to go in the 5th or back of the 5th or 6th round. After that, it's really going to be hit and miss for you. But there's guys like Pierre Strong Jr., Abram Smith that had a great Senior Bowl from Baylor. He's a little undersized, kind of a bowling ball kind of shape. Guy, but he's going to be a guy that's going to really do a nice job being a short down running back for you and a back out of the backfield. Jerome Ford, Devontae Price, Damian Pierce, I think is a completely underrated prospect for a team Florida that needs in between the tackles, kind of a 3-down back runner with a great mentality and attitude when he runs. Like he's literally not going to avoid contact. He is going to initiate contact. I love running backs like that.
Well, then there's kind of the opposite player of him, which is Rashad White, who's super elusive, guy who's going to catch the ball to the backfield.
He's going to test really well at the combine.
He's going to test really well. He's going to be, everyone's going to be like, whoa, super athletic. And they're going to look at his film. They're going to see him not look for contact, but instead run away from contact a lot, and just because he's so athletic. And he's going to be a fantastic player on a team that throws the ball over the place, and they want to get the ball to their running back out of the backfield and let them do fun things.
Yes, and he's a bigger back too. I mean, he looks like he could be a physical back, and then he's really not. He just doesn't have that mentality.
No, and the thing is, the fact that he is a bigger back, even if he doesn't have that mentality, what that tends to mean is that he's going to have some durability. He's got the body to take the hits like a bigger back, even if he's winning as a guy that's catching the ball out of the backfield and doing the elusive things. So, if you're looking for a guy that's going to be there, kind of long term, there's reason to believe that, Rashad White's going to be a good pick for you.
Yeah, 2 guys in the 4th round range that could help themselves out of this combine are James Cook and Tyler Algeria. I want to see both of them as far as agility and straight line speed for James Cook. Ben reports that he's going to run in like the 4.6 range. And James Cook needs to be able to run in the low 4.5s in order to be drafted in the 4th round range, because teams are going to view him a certain way, and if he can't do that, then that's not going to be good for him.
With Algeria, I actually don't have notes on him. I was thinking he was a significantly older player. Is that accurate or not?
You mean from BYU? It's where he went on a mission, and he's 25 years old coming into the league. I don't have his age. I can find out.
That's what I was thinking with him, and that's why I don't have notes on him. Is I'm just like, with older players, especially older players in positions like running back and wide receiver, tend to just ignore them because they almost never pan out in the NFL, and so they're just never on my radar.
Okay, so I'm gonna take a look. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking at trying now, and I'm not seeing anything. Maybe he's not. I don't know. anyways, I guess
so. He's 5'11", 220.
Yeah,
he runs a 4.4 4.40. See, that's where he's going to help himself if he can run into the low 4.4s at 5'11", 220 with the tape that he's had. He's gonna do well for himself. I'm not finding an age.
Oh yeah. So I
would assume that he's probably going to be at least a 24-year-old prospect.
Probably. So let's move on to wide receiver, because this is a group that has a lot of depth. There's a lot of names, especially in those middle rounds, that I think are you're going to see a lot of guys come in and be the number 2, number 3 receivers at the NFL level. Maybe not a lot of guys that are going to come in and be that number 1, that Julio Jones or DK Metcalf or that kind of player, but a lot of guys are going to come in and be that number 2. Which actually provides a lot of depth in this draft. So you're going to be able to get a guy.
I think there's 25 or 30 prospects here that we're talking about that are going to go before the 6th round.
Yeah, that's a lot of players. It's a lot of talent. A lot of you're going to see a lot of teams really liking what they get and being able to rely on players. So it's a fun group. Even if there's not that top. I mean, people are going to look at like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Drake London and some of these guys as first round picks, but I'm not sure any of them are Julio Jones or a young AJ Green or a Nuke Hopkins, that kind of thing. They're kind of in that tier right below them.
Yeah, these are going to be more workhorses kind of guys that get open, guys that move the chains on 3rd down, check down guys. You're still going to have some speed here. I mean, a guy like Khalil Shakir is going to be good. Christian Watson, Alec Pierce, those guys are going to be available in the 3rd round, and you're going to have great value with those type of guys. David Bell, I think, is underrated. He's going to go in the 2nd round probably, but a nice, big, tall wide receiver that's going to be physical, that's going to be a chain mover. I like him a lot. I've got mixed feelings on George Pickens. I like David Bell as a prospect a lot better, although they're on big boards all over the place, having somewhat equal value. Romeo Doubs is an interesting guy out of Nevada, a smaller school guy that people are going to look at. Velus Jones is a guy that I've talked about a little bit last week on doing some mock drafts that I see a lot of value in, as far as a back end of the 5th round, 6th round kind of a guy that is going to run into the 4.38 range for a 6 foot, 200-pound receiver out of Tennessee. I think, if you're looking for a middle round kind of a guy that's going to be a great special teams guy, that's going to be able to return for you as well to add some value. You're going to look at guys like that, Reggie Robertson, Danny Gray, Slade Bolden, all those kind of guys are going to give you some good value.
Yeah, and then you can go all the way down to a guy like Trey Turner out of the Virginia Tech, and just be like, there's talent up and down this draft. It is a good group of players. And
how about this name, Charleston Rambo?
Okay, that's a good name.
I like it. He's gonna be your decapitator on special teams.
Yeah, you'd hope so. If he's not,
his name alone, like the Rambo is a last name on your jersey. Yeah,
you might better
just
be
run
able
backwards, just so you can see Rambo coming.
You better be, if you have that name, you better be able to live up to it.
You better, right? Yeah, just like Smoke Monday, you better be carrying a pack of smokes in your sleeve. Just because you're coming with a reputation. All right. So tight end, Keith, there's some decent tight ends. There's not special tight ends in this class, but there's a whole bunch of guys that are going to be able to come in and have an impact on your rotation, depending on what
interesting guys. There's interesting guys in this. I don't know if it's not a good group. Your best tight end in this group, in my opinion, is Trey McBride out of Colorado State. He's a guy that kind of does everything, but does he do anything?
Mr. Production. He can catch the ball, Keith. He's a natural pass catcher. And he put up the stats.
He's not a dynamic route runner where he's going to, stretch defenses and be a big play guy. He's a guy who's good at catching the ball, but.
And what is he, like 6'4", 249, something like that?
Yeah.
And he runs like a 4.65. So he's an average athletic guy, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think he could be overdrafted because of teams that feel like they really need a guy earlier. And then, he might end up going in the back of the first or top of the second round. I don't see it. I really don't. I think he's more of a back into the second, third round kind of guy. A guy, if you have an extra pick that you go and you get a little weapon for your quarterback out of that position, he's not going to really be an inline blocking guy. Might give you the effort, but he might not be able to physically handle that job. So,
but if you're looking for a weapon, why wouldn't you draft a guy like Isaiah Likely a full round later, maybe a round and a half later, who's a better runner? He's a more polished, route runner, can get open, can stretch the field a little bit. Granted, he can't block at all, whereas McBride can, but he's a guy he's just more developed as a receiver.
He's got some of the softest hands in the entire draft. Just a really natural pass catcher. A couple of guys that are underrated, I think, are Jeremy Ruckert and Greg Dolcich out of UCLA. Jeremy Ruckert at Ohio State. He had an amazing pass catching background coming out of high school. One of the most highly rated tight ends in the country. He had just tremendously productive as a pass catcher, and then went to Ohio State and just died on the vine as far as his pass catching ability is concerned, because he just didn't have it in the scheme for Ohio State. He just was underutilized. Great inline blocker. He kind of does it all. He can catch the ball for you. He's got the same sort of, he's a 250, 255 guy at 4.65. He's got the length. He's got the skill set. He's a good, solid, all-around tight end for you. I think it'd be a good value in the back of the third or early fourth round.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I would draft. And I would draft him because I know he can block, and I know that he's an inline blocker. He's a guy that's going to, if you're running, off tackle, he's going to push that defensive end and get up on a linebacker. He's going to be able to do those things for you. And as a receiver, even though he doesn't have the production at college, you can see the way that he moves, his hands, those kind of things, that he's going to be a nice outlet for your quarterback. He's going to have a lot of upside in that.
And he went to Ohio State. He's very well coached.
Yeah.
Like, he understands offenses. He understands movement and where he's supposed to be. He understands all levels of the defense. He's kind of a student of the game, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot to be said for guys like that in the NFL. He's going to be like a coach's best friend on offense type of a guy. And you need players like that on your team. So I would imagine that he would probably likely move up a little bit after the combine because of just the interview process. I think he's going to do really well there.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that's going to he's probably going to push Trey McBride as the number one tight end in this class.
Wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me, because I think teams value diversity and be able to be scheme diverse. And he's the guy. What do you think about Craig Dolcich? I know we've talked about him before, but
I like him. I think he is that
he did
guy
really well at the Senior Bowl too.
He did. He looked really good at the Senior Bowl, and I think that was an important thing for him and his draft process in being able to kind of get noticed, because coming out of UCLA, it wasn't kind of viewed as being this great NFL prospect, but he came out and was kind of dominant at times, both as a blocker and as a receiver. And I think that he's a guy that's going to move up draft boards pretty quick. The one concern is people are expecting him to run kind of slow at the combine. And if that's true, well, then he may stay down in the 4th, 5th round range. But if he comes in and surprises and gets up in like the 4.65 range, you may see him up in the 3rd round. I
agree with that. I think that's likely to happen, actually. No disrespect to Isaiah Likely. So I think we're going to split this show in half. Just as a warning to our listeners, because we're going to go long, just talking about offensive guys, and then we'll get to the defense. Let's talk about the offensive line, Keith. You love evaluating offensive line prospects.
Yep.
Is there, we can go through offensive tackles and then interior guys if you want. Is there anybody that you're looking forward to seeing at the combine?
Well, there's a couple of guys I'm looking forward to seeing. One is Daniel Falele at 380 pounds, 6'9". The guy's just absolutely massive. I want to see him come out, and I want to see what he looks like, how he moves, because a guy that big is just going to be interesting. I don't know if he's a great player, and what we saw at the Senior Bowl certainly makes me concerned that
I know that he was
drafting him.
He was getting pretty comfortable with the ground at the Senior Bowl, so I'm not sure that I even want to see him at the combine.
No, I mean, I want to see him. Because I think that either way, it's going to be interesting.
Is there a guy? Is there a tackle that's coming into the combine that you think might be overrated?
Other than him,
you're looking, yeah, exactly. That you're or underrated, that you're looking to either move up or move down.
So a guy
respectively.
I'll start with the underrated guy, and that would be Sean Ryan out of UCLA. I think that he's a dominant run blocker, can really move people, and I think he's going to test really well. And I think the fact that if you watch his tape and his feet, he's got the feet to play left tackle. I think he's a guy that is being looked at as like, late 2, early 3-round pick. And yet he's got left tackle potential. And I think he's going to come out, he's going to test really well. People are going to move him off of that. Oh, he's only a right tackle. And say, hey, he can play both sides. And you're going to see him move up on draft boards because of that.
So you think that he has the ability to play left tackle in the NFL?
I think he does. Is he going to be a high-end left tackle? No, he's going to be a high-end right tackle. But he is one of those guys where if you need a left tackle and you can't get a guy like Trevor Penning or someone like that you're picking later, you could get Sean Ryan, you could put him at left tackle, and he's going to be good. He's not going to be maybe not great there. I
agree. So I agree with that. I think he's a natural right tackle with physical and athletic attributes that give him the opportunity to play on the left side if he would need to.
And he's a guy that I think he's a natural right tackle. You want to put him over there and let him dominate. But if you have to put a guy on the left side, he's not going to fail you over there. I think it's going to be.
I would want to see I want to see his length. I want to see where he comes in at measurable wise. If he's got 35-inch arms, then I think that you're right. If he comes in at 33 and a half, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that I think it has a chance to move up quite a bit if he tests well, especially looking at his short shuttle, his ability to move laterally. I expect that to be, pretty dang good. And if it is, people are going to say, oh, guess what? He's got the feet to be our left tackle. And then you're right. He does need the length. He's 6'5", though. He's got some natural length kind of built in there. He's just got that tree trunk lower half that you want to see out of an offensive tackle. I think he's underrated, and I think he'll move up. A guy that might move down, Bernard Raymond, and he's a guy that I could see just not testing all that well. I mean, he's 6'7", 304, so people are going to be enamored with his size and length. But if he does really well on the bench and shows off a lot of strength there, I'll kind of be a little surprised. I'm just not expecting him to test that well. So
a guy that I'm looking at to move up a little bit in this draft would be Abraham Lucas out of Washington State. Just because I think teams end up valuing athletic prospects. And I anticipate Abraham Lucas to test well at 332 pounds, 6'7", has got a natural left tackle build. Reportedly could run close to a 5.0 40. And if he's got a wingspan of like 83 and a half inches at that size and runs and tests agility wise, and his feet move quick, and he does well in the drills. He's a guy that can move, from the middle of the third round into the middle of the second round. That's just something that I'm looking for.
For him, you look at his tape, and you're going to see a technician, but not a mauler. He's a guy that does a good job of getting in the way, more than dominating. And I think that teams are going to be really interested. They're expecting to test really well, but they're going to be interested to see how he does on the bench, and how he does, on those kind of things. So that way they can get a feel for, does he have the functional strength to play that? And he might not, but that doesn't mean he can't develop.
Well, he's going to be a tremendous pass blocker right out of the gate. And the question for him is he going to have the bend to be able to run block, or at least have the potential to be a decent run blocker as time goes on. Another guy that I think is going to fall a little bit, or is somewhat overrated in this draft, is Max Mitchell. And the reason being is I just think he doesn't have the functional strength, and I think he's going to get exposed a little bit in this combine, and we'll see. And he's coming in at 6'6", 297. So a team that's looking for an athletic guy that's able to move in space in kind of an outside zone scheme might look at this guy with some value, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. How about interior guys, Keith?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that I'm going to be watching for is Tyler Linderbaum, who's the top-rated center. He got hurt in bowl game, and I want to see where he's at with his medicals. He may not even participate in the combine just because he's still recovering. But if he's able to go out and participate and do anything, that's going to be a great sign for him. As we get closer to draft day, that he's starting to get healthy enough that teams are going to be like, okay, we can put him back where we had him on our draft board before his injury. And so if he can do anything at the combine, it's going to be great for him.
What if he wasn't able to do anything, Keith? What if it looked like he was going to be a couple months away and teams weren't able to evaluate him? He went through the process of interviewing and so forth, but couldn't do anything out on the field. Do you think that drops him close to being out of the first round?
I think it'll drop him from being middle of the first round to being in the back end, because teams are still going to look at his tape and they're still going to be like, yeah, he was really good. So I could see them being like, okay, well, what do his medical records say? What does the surgeon say? What does our medical staff say? Is he going to be able to be back to being the same player? And if he is, then let's go ahead and take him. But he's going to drop a little bit because teams are going to be worried about re-injury and and that kind of stuff. But he's still a guy that's, man, his tape is just excellent. So I still think he goes in the first round, but unless the doctors are like, no, the injury is bad and he's not going to play much this year, he needs another year of recovery, then I could see him falling, middle, late second, but I don't expect that.
So can I ask you about a prospect that I think that there's a lot of disagreement on, would be Bernard Raymond out of Central Michigan. He's a guy
that I brought up.
A lot of players, a lot of people think that he might be better off moving on into the inside, but he is 6'7". He's only 304. But out of that 6'7", 304 frame, he's only got 33-inch arms and 80-inch wingspan.
Yeah.
Now he is really athletic. He's a guy that came over on a foreign exchange from Austria. So interesting prospect. But he's an older prospect too. He's 24 and a half right now. He's going to be 25 years old next year. People have him in this range of the back end of the first round to the early second round, Keith. And I just don't know what you do with Bernard Raymond in the NFL.
I don't see him going in that range. I think he's too tall to be an effective guard, in that, guys are going to be able to get under his pads. He's a guy that needs to be, he needs to be a tackle, but he doesn't have the length. Even at 6'7", he doesn't have the length. And he doesn't have, a tremendous amount of functional strength. He's a guy that I don't expect to test well, in the bench. And so I could see him being that we don't even know what position he's going to play. If he's going to play, he's going to be a right tackle. And if he's going to be a right tackle, he better be able to run block. And I don't see that. I see him as more of a technician, as a pass blocker. And I think he's going to struggle to find a home. Ultimately, I think his role is as a swing tackle where he can play both sides, come off the bench,
add some functional strength and weight.
Yeah, over a couple of years and see what we've got.
But see, the problem is over a couple of years, and he's going to be 27 years old.
Yeah, why are you drafting a player in rounds 1 or 2 whose your plan is for them to be a backup for their first 2 years? So
that's why I'm thinking that this guy could tumble a little bit.
I do too. I think he's got a lot to lose unless he comes out and just blows everyone away in terms of the combine results. And he needs to,
he's longer than projected.
Yeah, if he surprises me and gets out there and does 30 reps on the bench press, then I'm like, I'll change my tune and be like, okay, I think this guy could be a starting right tackle right now, but I just don't see it.
Did you know this about him? He actually converted when he arrived at college, converted from wide receiver to tackle. He runs a 4.85 40 at 307 pounds.
I did not know that. I did not know
which is crazy, right? So he may surprise us with the agility. And the testing, which puts him in an interesting thing now. If somebody didn't know better, they may have switched him, I think, maybe to defensive tackle or defensive end, depending on his temperament. When he first arrived there, because he's got a better body to be like a 3 tech or a 5 tech. Mm-hmm. Especially if he struggles to keep weight on, a guy like that's forced, when he switched to tackle, he was 290 pounds in college. If that 304 pounds is just not natural for him, I'm not exactly sure what you do with him. I would be skeptical to draft him, but that's just me.
A guy who could do himself a lot of good at the combine is Zion Johnson out of Boston College. Because he's kind of viewed as a guy who's like, well, if they move him to center, he'll be a starting player, but he's listed at guard. He's only played guard. Mm-hmm. And you're like, maybe he doesn't look like he's going to be like a guy that's worth the high draft pick, at guard. And because most guards aren't worth a high draft pick, it's a low value position. But they're like, oh, if you move him to center, but if he can come in and just test significantly better than people are expecting, he could definitely give people like, hey, you know what? If he doesn't have all the little things that you need out of a center, he could still be a starting guard for you. And it takes a lot of the risk out of drafting him. And I could see him reinserting him there as a 2nd round pick.
You mentioned risk. He didn't miss a snap in college.
Yep.
And he's super athletic at 310 pounds, 6'3". He did a almost 35-inch vertical, 4.7 shuttle, and 32 reps on the bench. When you have that combination and you're smart and you can play center, and you're a smooth mover and you can get out into space and you have the instincts, and he has all of those things. And he played in a good system for offensive linemen. Boston College churns out offensive linemen pretty consistently, and mm-hmm. he's got a shot, especially if he can get his 40 time down into the 5.0 range. I think that he's a prospect that could go into the back end of the 2nd round.
Yeah, like I said, I think if he comes out and tests well, he can get himself into as a 2nd round guy. If he doesn't test well, you're going to see him in the late 3s, and people are just going to view him as a guy that has the potential to be a starter, but might end up as a backup. And so he needs to give people the perception that his floor is higher, that his floor is that of a, middle tier starter, and that his ceiling is higher. That's what he's got to do. Because right now, I think he's viewed kind of as his floor as a long-term backup and a guy that you don't want starting.
All right. So that's probably likely the part 1 of a part 2 podcast. And we just went through the offensive side of the prospects going to the NFL Combine this week. So Thanks for listening to the Pro Football Playbook Podcast. Follow Keith at Myers NFL. Bill is at Alvstad NFL. The show is at PF_Playbook. Listen and subscribe on your favorite podcast app or YouTube and at our website, profootballplaybook.co.